I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master. I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. I've been waiting for you. The circle is now complete. We meet again at last. I was waiting for you. Now the circle is now complete again at last. When I left you, I was but the circle is now complete. The circle is now complete. I was but the circle is now complete. I was but the I left you. I was but the now I was but the now I was but the I was but now I was but the
Well, that didn't take long. I said Disney would find a way to ruin the Kenobi series, and they did it in record time. How? By making Obi-Wan Kenobi a coward. Not afraid, not rusty, a coward. Just look at this. Treated, disrespected, totally bitched. How did we get here? Let's start from the beginning. The episode picks up with Obi-Wan and Leia on the cargo freighter. Obi's tried to communicate with Qui-Gon Jinn. Remember how at the end of episode 3, Yoda told Obi that he'd teach him how to speak with Qui-Gon through the Force? Well, apparently Obi either never managed to do it, sucked at it, or Qui-Gon Jinn doesn't accept collect calls, cause he never answers. Obi's asking for the strength to face Vader, who's putting on his supersuit. It's nice to see the construction of Vader, and even better that it's Hayden Christensen in the suit. Of course, the best part is the voice. James Earl Jones graces us yet again, and sounds like he's never missed a step. Reva contacts Vader to let him know about Obi, and there's finally a little information about her motivations. Vader deduces that she wants to be the new Grand Inquisitor. She shanked the original one back in the last episode, and he'll give her the role if she brings in Kenobi. If not, then it's off with her head, and several other limbs. Meanwhile, back on the freighter, Leia asks about the Force and what it feels like, and Obi describes it as like turning on the light to fight off the dark. Nice metaphor. It's almost like it's setting up Obi reconnecting with the Force. I'm sure we're going to explore that thoroughly in this episode. Anyway, Leia and Obi land on Mapuzo, a mining planet the Empire has now taken over. The pair are supposed to meet with their contact here, but Obi has doubts. When Leia asks why Haja would have lied to them, Obi snaps at her, saying people are not all good. That's true, but this moment doesn't make sense because in the previous episode, Leia was shown to be able to see right through people. She should be fully aware that people lie to others and themselves. This is probably a play on Leia being a 10-year-old kid, but she can't both be mature for her age and totally innocent. As Obi and Leia walk, Obi catches a vision of Anakin wrapped in his Jedi robes, totally throwing Obi off. That's a great moment. You know what would have been better? If Obi had started having visions of Anakin on Tatooine, and then had the scene of Reva telling him that Vader still lives. Then it goes to Reva arriving at the Inquisitor's headquarters, and she has to walk 400 miles to get into this thing. She has to go through this, and this, and this, just to get to the Inquisitor room. Why? It's not dramatic, it's just silly. She gets into the room and tells the others to send out the probes. She then gets punked by the fifth brother, who also wants to be the Grand Inquisitor. Reva reveals that she's contacted Vader and that these are his orders. She gets sassy with fifth brother and her delivery is just odd. She keeps trying to go from calm to angry but sounds more annoyed than pissed, and there's this weird pause at the end. It just doesn't work. What does work is this idea of the Inquisitors all scheming against each other, and there's a hint that maybe Reva's motivations aren't really to be their Grand Inquisitor, but just to get revenge on the people who've hurt her. Back on Mapuzo, the contact never shows, so Obi and Leia are stuck until Leia spots some shipper coming down the road. She flags him down, Obi tells her not to talk, so Leia introduces herself to discount Seth Rogen as Illuma, and Obi as Orden, farmers from Tall. Apparently they were visiting their family in the middle of nowhere and got lost. The driver, Frick, doesn't buy it, but gives him a ride anyway. Turns out that Frick just loves the Empire, and it's strange because lore-wise, the Empire specifically targets non-humans for discrimination, especially ones with less humanoid features. Frick would have little reason to like the Empire, but he does. The group then happens upon a bunch of stormtroopers who question Obi and Leia, and in a moment of staggering stupidity, Obi calls Leia by her real name instead of Luma. This is the guy who's been telling her to pretend that they're father and daughter and farmers from Tall ever since he rescued her, and the moment he's actually pressed, he slips. Sure, when people don't do something for a while, they get rusty, but this seems forced, and it was. Obi plays off the name mix-up as him confusing Luma for her mother, who'd recently died. This was all to have a reason for Obi to say that Leia reminds him of her real mother, Padamame or Panda Bear or whatever the fuck her name was. The troopers buy this and go about their business. Once they leave, Leia confronts Obi about knowing her real mother, and then flat out asks him if he's her real father, which he denies. That's got to be a nod to the fan theory that Obi and Padme were having an affair. If it's not, it's miraculous that the writers would stumble onto that. Leia also confronts Obi about constantly lying to her, which is interesting that she catches this at 10 years old, but 9 years later, a then 19-year-old Luke never notices. It also sets up a difference for the reason why Obi lies to the twins. He lies to Leia to protect her, while he lies to Luke to manipulate him into becoming a weapon to kill Vader. Another reason is probably unintentional, but the scene also sets up why Obi would use Luke against Vader instead of Leia. He knows of Luke, maybe eventually talks to the boy, but he actually cares about Leia. Of course, in the original lore, I don't think Leia and Obi ever met. Instead, Leia had heard stories about him from her father. Anyway, the group arrives at the checkpoint where Discount Seth Rogen snitches on Obi and Leia, and stormtroopers bring out a probe to scan Obi. It finds a match, so Obi kills all the troopers with the blaster. But that's not the important part. The important part is that the troopers are no match for him. Granted, they are stormtroopers, but even after not fighting for a decade, Obi easily takes them down. He even manages a precision shot when one of the troopers grabs Leia. It would appear that 10 years of not fighting hasn't affected his prowess. I'm sure that'll remain true for the rest of the episode. Obi knocks out Frick and takes out the checkpoint beams, only to be stopped by a fresh batch of stormtroopers. They demand that he lie down on the ground, but fail to notice he still has the blaster in his hand and is aiming directly at them. Yes, they're stormtroopers. Yes, they're known for being poor shots and nothing but cannon fodder, but come on. She, yes, it's a female trooper, is looking right at him with the damn gun in his hand. How do you miss that? Well, it doesn't matter because Ilaria Sand shoots them in the back. Turns out she was a contact and says that she tried to meet Obi and Leia but got delayed by Reva's orders, and when she arrived at the meeting place, Obi and Leia weren't there. Sure, that makes perfect sense, except for one thing. You're coming from the opposite direction, so how could you even know they weren't there? But for Obi shooting the probe, it looks like he would never even known they had arrived. Meanwhile, the Inquisitors inform Vader of Obi's location. Back on Mapuzo, Ilaria takes Obi and Leia to a safe house and reveals that she's part of the Underground Railroad helping Jedi and Force-sensitive kids escape. There's a name drop of Quinlan, which means absolutely nothing to anyone who hasn't watched the Clone Wars TV show, but implies that he might show up in one of the remaining 3 episodes. In case you're wondering, this is Quinlan, so I think we know where this will probably go. As all this goes down, troopers show up to check the safe house, but the loading droid guarding it, who can't talk, plays dumb and they eventually leave. Ilaria, or Tala, reveals that she's disillusioned with the Empire and is now working against it. She shows them a secret tunnel that they can use to get to the escape ship, but then Obi feels a presence. He runs to the door and looks outside, and somehow, in the span of minutes, is gone from the middle of the day to the dead of night. Why? Because Vader has arrived. Apparently, he brought the night with him too. Now, everyone is scared shitless. The troopers, the Inquisitors, and the people in the town. And that last part is really important because they would have no reason to be afraid of Vader unless they knew who he was and what he does. Mapuzo isn't exactly a tourist destination, so the fact that these people in the middle of nowhere know about Vader pretty much destroys this idea that Obi had no idea Vader was alive. It's just not plausible. 1. Yoda calls Anakin Vader when he shows Obi the video of Anakin killing Jedi, so Obi knows this is the same person. 2. Tatooine is well known for its scum and villainy, so it's very likely people on the run from the Empire might show up and have carefully edited stories to tell. 3. Vader is murking people with the Force. He senses Obi-Wan is there and starts killing people just to fuck with Obi. He strangles a father, snaps the son's neck, and drags a screaming woman through the street, all just to get Obi to come out of hiding. He's so violent, even the Inquisitors are afraid. There's no way anyone's keeping this a secret. Obi would have to know about Vader after Vader spending 10 years murdering people in public. So Obi sends Leia with Tala so he can protect her from Vader. He runs into the mining fields where Vader shows up and pops his saber. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi turns into a bitch. There's no other way to describe it. Well, that's not true. He turns into a sniveling, pants-wetting, pussy-ass bitch. He's so scared he doesn't even light the saber. He just runs. Dude, I thought you were a Jedi, not some cop from Uvalde. And then he appears to run back the same way he came because no one told director Deborah Chow that if you cut to another shot that looks damn near identical to the first one, it'll make people think it's the same shot and that Obi is running back to Vader instead of from him. You don't have to reshoot it, you just have to flip the shot. Anyway, Obi runs and Vader shows up behind him. He must have been holding his breath the whole time, and they start to fight. Now, remember how Obi was still a good shot when he got caught by the stormtroopers? Yeah, all that's gone now. Vader just whoops his natural ass. Finn fought better than this. That's not to say Obi-Wan should be the monster that he was in the prequels. He can be rusty, but not a wet-ass pussy. He's just destroyed. Thoroughly destroyed. All his skill left him because, what? He's scared of Vader? This isn't as bad as having Luke try to murder his nephew because he had a wet dream, but it's still terrible and unnecessary. We didn't need to see Obi and Vader fight, especially if it's not going to be an actual fight. The tension of them almost meeting, of Obi sensing Vader's malice, of Vader almost learning about Luke and Leia would have been enough. You don't have to do this. While all this is happening, Leia decides to send Tala to help Obi-Wan because he needs it, which, again, whatever. Meanwhile, Reva spots the loader droid coming out of the safe house and decides to check it out for some reason and finds the hiding place. She sees the Jedi symbol and loses her mind and finds the tunnel Obi, Leia, and Tala used to escape. It seems like Reva knows something about these tunnels though, so she doesn't go through them. This is again hinting that she's a former Padawan and has something against the Jedi and perhaps even used escape tunnels like this before. This explains why she doesn't bump into Tala, who's apparently heading back that way. It doesn't explain how Tala gets out of the tunnels when the stormtroopers are rounding up everyone. Unless there's another exit that's never shown, Tala would have to go out of the front door of the safe house right into Imperial hands. But she doesn't. Back at the quarry, Vader corners Obi, grabs him with the Force, which Obi can't break free of, and then knocks down some flammable rocks, lights them on fire with the saber, which is admittedly cool, and Force pulls Obi through the fire. Hell, he might as well kill him, but that can't happen because of the lore, so Vader stops when he's basically won and sends troopers to get Obi so he could torture him some more later. So, to recap, Obi is scared shitless of Vader to the point he forgets how to fight. He hasn't used the Force for nearly a decade to the point he struggles to stop Leia from falling to her death. When confronted with Vader, Obi gets manhandled and dragged through fire. And this is a man who plans to train Luke Skywalker to fight Vader on his own with minimal training. You took one of the dumber parts of Star Wars, this idea of waiting until Luke is grown to train him, and actually made it dumber. Impressive. Most impressive. Then Tala shows up and kills the trooper sent to get Obi from this obvious high ground position, and all of them, including Vader, look in every direction but up. Vader should be fucking paranoid about anyone having high ground, but no. Instead, Tala lights the rest of the rocks on fire while Vader watches the loader droid carry Obi-Wan away. How about just force pulling Tala off the cliff into the flames? Or snapping her neck? It's not like he can't sense where she is. He could see her if he just turned his head. But that makes too much sense. So he just leaves. He leaves. Vader leaves as he's winning. Oy fucking vey. So Tala's going to take Obi to Jabim to get healed. Meanwhile, Leia runs into Reva, who somehow managed to find a contact and kill him, and she chases after Leia. And that's how it ends. So it's gonna be one of these shows, is it? They just couldn't help themselves. Just because Obi's broken doesn't mean he has to be incapable. You could have made this work by having Vader mess with Obi's head by showing him visions while they were fighting, so that Obi's disoriented, so now it makes sense why he can't fight back. But no, you just made him look like a coward. On the plus side, it was nice to see Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen together again. There was also the right amount of Reva in this show, enough to get her motivations, but not so much that she feels like a second protagonist. And that's about it. This lore-breaking fight, which probably won't be the last one, was just disappointing, unnecessary, and unfair to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yes, he's a lying manipulator who tricks a 19-year-old into trying to kill his own father to fix Obi's fuck-up, but he still deserves better than this. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.